Good afternoon, Tansei Aneen. Welcome to APTN InFocus. I'm Daryl Stranger. Today, we're putting activism among young Indigenous people in focus, from organizing rallies and walks to creating platforms for Indigenous people to speak their mind. We have a jam-packed show for you today. There's so much to talk about, so why don't we just get right into it? Our first guest joining us this afternoon is Chevy Rabbit. Rabbit is a Cree trans person living in Edmonton who has been an advocate for Indigenous issues and the LGBTQ+ community. And before we speak to Chevy, here is Chris Stewart with a little bit about her.
When people started being hateful, I thought, well, it's not me. There's nothing wrong with me. I know I'm loved. I'm a good person. I do good things.
A decade ago, Chevy Rabbit was a victim of a hate crime. She was assaulted and robbed. It left her traumatized. She decided to try to stop violence towards the LGBTQ+ community, and she created the Hate to Hope rally. The rally attracts hundreds each year to promote peace instead of hate. Chevy Rabbit became a needed voice.
I became an advocate here in the city when I got gay bashed, and I never thought I would become an advocate. I never thought I'd have to use my voice to help others, and not only that, help entire communities. So I think it's been an interesting journey, a healing process, a self-discovery, all intertwined into one.
She says many people over the years have told her she has helped them in difficult times.
I would say a lot of men and a lot of LGBT men, no matter their cultural background or ethnicity, I would say a lot of men in the city and a lot of men in the province who are closeted because they're too scared to come out. It's not safe yet for them. And I would say a lot of trans folks have come and advocating. I think a lot of trans folks, despite whether you're Indigenous or not, need people to speak on their behalf.
I see it on Facebook earlier.
Rabbit says it's been an honor representing people.
Have a rally.
She meets with local and provincial governments to offer a path forward for the LGBTQ+ community and the Indigenous community.
To advocate for people who are marginalized, people without a voice, people who are struggling, because I can say from a bird's eye view, looking in the entire LGBTQ from an Indigenous lens is going through active trauma. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I think the work that I'm doing is really meaningful and impactful.
In 2017, she was recognized in Avenue Edmonton magazine as a top 40 under 40 in the city. Rabbit also co-created the Walk a Mile in a Ribbon Skirt event in 2020. The event brings awareness of the importance and cultural significance of the ribbon skirt. She now works as a reporter for the Alberta Native News and says being an advocate has been fulfilling, and it's also been challenging.
So I think it's scary at times because you don't want to let people down, because you can see a lot of people who need help. You can see whole families who are learning inclusivity, they're learning pronouns, they're learning to give dignity and space to people who otherwise would be a pariah.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Well, Chevy is here now. Chevy, it is an absolute pleasure to be able to speak with you today. Thank you so much for taking a few minutes for us.
Awesome, thank you for having me.
Well, I just wanted to ask this first question. Now, I know you're always busy, you're always working on something. So what are some of the things you're currently working on or trying to work towards in terms of making some changes for the better?
Right now I'm on a Native Women's Association of Canada for the External Housing Committee for LGBTQ folks and the Pan-Canada Women's Housing Committee. I've sat on the committee for 3 years. So currently I'm working on housing, trying to find safe, affordable, and inclusive housing, working with CMHC, Housing Advocate, through these organizations and making recommendations. So housing is a big part of my advocacy right now, because I believe you can't have a life without a house. You can't build your life without a home. And the second thing I'm working on right now is Hate to Hope. It's on its 12th year. It's going to be happening next month in Edmonton at City Hall on November 25th. And this weekend we have Walk a Mile in a Ribbon Skirt. Walk a Mile in a Ribbon Skirt. It's the 4th year, and it's with Lana Heal, emceeing, and in partnership with the City of Edmonton.
Well, you just mentioned a couple of the initiatives there that are coming up here. I mean, what do those initiatives mean to you, to you personally? What did these mean to you?
Well, I think for housing is a huge issue because there's so much housing discrimination for Indigenous people, and especially for marginalized transgender women and gender diverse folks. Often the housing is unsafe, and we need to like provide housing for the LGBTQ community. And for the Walk a Mile in a Ribbon Skirt, it's all about creating a safe and inclusive space for the LGBTQ community. We're looking for a place to heal. We're looking for inclusivity. So yeah, it's all about creating those safe spaces and that are inclusive.
Well, and Chevy, when did you realize that you wanted to use your voice to speak out on matters that were important to you and Indigenous people, or is this something you've just always had and always done? Is speak out?
Well, I grew up with change makers. A lot of my family's in politics, advocating for the government with different initiatives. And my grandma, Sarah Shug, she advocated for all children and child and youth care here in Alberta. So I grew up with these influential people who were change makers for our community in Alberta. So I naturally, they inspired me growing up. And then I never really thought I would become an advocate. It all happened when I got assaulted at the University of Alberta in my 4th year. And from there, I started raising awareness and using my voice to help many people, because I realized a lot of people suffer in silence. And I figured I'll do my role as an advocate and create a safe environment for people like myself so that they can live, work, and dream in Alberta and Canada, because we all deserve that.
Mm-hmm. And what's it like for you, Chevy, to be looked upon and looked up to from a lot of different people from all walks of life? What's that like for you to be looked at as an advocate and as somebody to look up to?
Well, I'm really proud. It's a good question, actually. I never really thought about it because I'm so busy working. I'm always on a different initiative. There's so much work to be done. I partner with so many different organizations and politicians and other change makers, and don't really have time to think about it. But I think it's an honor, and it doesn't really do anything because the work has to get done. And we all there's so much work in human rights and social justice that we all need to do our part. And a lot of the initiatives that I've been doing, I create space for new advocates. And so over the last 12 years, I've had a lot of advocates who wanted to use their voice, and I often provided those platforms for up-and-coming advocates to use their voice as well. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, people might look up to you for support and guidance, but who do you look towards, for support and guidance in your fight?
Well, I think all the women in my life, my mother, my grandma, my gokam, and all my aunties, basically the home fires. They do the thankless jobs. They raise our families, they raise the community. They inspire me. So when I think about the people who inspire me, it's all the women in my life and all of the home fires. Those people who keep our families safe and yeah.
And Chevy, what keeps you going and keeps you, creating these initiatives and these walks and rallies and participating in all these different things? What keeps you going, over the years? I can't imagine it's easy to keep, sort of doing this kind of work, but what keeps you at it and keeps you going?
I think recognizing and there needs to be more. Good question. Right now I'm really a little tired. I've been working a lot. I just got back from Ottawa a few days ago, so a little tired and writing a lot. So, but what keeps me going is when I look at my nieces and my nephews and my gender diverse relatives, and I look at them, and I don't want them to go to school, go to U of A and get assaulted. I want to know I did my part to try make the world a different place, more safe and inclusive, so that when they go out and they go to school, work, they don't get assaulted, they don't get discriminated against. So I feel like what keeps me going is I look at my kinship, I look at them growing, and I do that for them. So everything I've been doing, I look at them as inspiration, because I really want them to self-actualize and aspire to be whatever they want to be and not worry about their safety. Because right now, when I was going to school, my education got disrupted, and yes, I turned a negative situation into something positive, but I want them to focus on their gifts, on their talents, on their education, not worry about safety.
Mm-hmm. And Chevy, have you seen a shift maybe or a rise or change in how young Indigenous people are also speaking out more? Have you seen that since you've started to do this a bit more?
Yeah, I think like often I had to be my own advocate growing up too. I feel like there's a lot. I spent 12 years talking to so many schools, conferences, and telling people to speak up and use their voice, and providing these platforms like Hate to Hope, Walk a Mile, and partnering with different initiatives, and telling people to use their voice, because we all can be an advocate, and we all can advocate for a better world. Yeah.
Well, just with that, how can somebody go about, maybe, they feel strongly about, a certain initiative, or they want to speak out or speak up. How would they go about doing that? Do you have any advice for them?
I think everybody should speak up for themselves and also be an advocate in sisterhood and community. We all need to become an advocate, but it's unfortunate that we don't live in a society that doesn't require us to be an advocate, because society right now it isn't inclusive. It's lots of window dressing, so we have so much work to do. So in the meantime, we're building advocates through these initiatives and through the work that I'm doing, and encouraging people to use their voice and speak up for good, because we have to be the example. And I think us as Indigenous people are really great for becoming change makers, and a lot of the work that we do changes Canada, and I think we're brilliant.
Mm-hmm. No, certainly everyone is brilliant, Chevy. We're gonna have to leave it there, but thank you so much for coming on and sharing a bit of insight and a bit of your story with us today. We really do appreciate it, so thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, we do have to step aside for a moment. We still have plenty more InFocus to come. Stay with us. Do you have a question or comment? Send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca. Share your voice with APTN InFocus on your favorite social media, and watch live on APTN News, YouTube, and TikTok. Welcome back to APTN InFocus. Our next guest joining us here is Michael Redhead Champagne. He is a community leader from Winnipeg's North End and is constantly working towards building a more compassionate and welcoming world. And he joins us now. Michael, thank you so much for being here today. We really do appreciate it, and I know you're busy with a lot of different work and initiatives, so we do appreciate it. This show's all about young Indigenous people becoming the faces and voices of activism, and more are starting to come, which is great to see. How important is that there are young Indigenous people that are starting to use their voice and start to do the work that some of their predecessors were doing? How important is that?
I think it's essential that Indigenous young people take up the mantles that our former generations have fought for. Even for me being here on this show today, it's important for me to say that I'm not here to speak over youth voices. Mm-hmm. I'm an advocate for children, youth, and families, and so I make space for young people that have that lived experience in different systems so that they can have a say in the solutions that impact them. Too often, Indigenous young people have systems or people or decision makers doing things to them or deciding things for them. And so I've been working really hard over the years to develop models, strategies, and tips and tricks so that we can empower Indigenous young people to participate in some of these systems that have historically harmed them, their communities, or their families, and give them the tools that they need to be able to lean into their teachings and their culture so that the Indigenous knowledge and science in all of our histories and backgrounds can help inform the way that we move forward in a good way.
Yeah, well, that's really well said. And I mean, just how did you get your start? Was there like a certain point, something happened, or have you just always been sort of speaking out and sort of sharing your mind?
It's been a long time for me. I've been speaking out since I was probably 10 years old, and I think a lot of our listeners and Indigenous young people know the moment when you're sitting and there's a big group of people that are all maybe listening to somebody talk, and then somebody starts saying something that you disagree with, or maybe it's something that you're offended by, or it feels disrespectful to you. And what do you do when you're a kid? You put your hand up. And so from the time I was 10 years old and I first put my hand up and I said, I don't think that this is kind, I don't think this is respectful, let's do what we can to take care of everybody. I've been on this trajectory of trying to be a helper. And in our language, in Swampy Cree and dialect, in Innu, we say Oshkabewis. It's that helper.
Well, speaking of the Swampy Cree, we just talked off camera, and there's you're trying to do a really great initiative with trying to bring Swampy Cree to some of the youth in schools. Can you talk a little bit about that work?
Yeah, I've found that learning my language and learning my culture has been essential for me in understanding who I am. And so teachings and phrases like Minopomatsuin, which means the good life, or teachings like Wakotuin, which talks about the law of kinship, inform me in the work that I'm doing. I often say, especially when I'm working in non-Indigenous systems, I'm not working towards reconciliation, I'm working towards Minopomatsuin and the good life for everybody. Because for me in Minopomatsuin, we don't have to break our hearts as Indigenous people in front of non-Indigenous people just to say that we're human beings. In Minopomatsuin, we get to be our full, authentic selves. We get to laugh loudly, we get to joke, we get to smile, we get to visit, we get to share food, and we get to share language and culture. And so at the St. John's Library in the north end of Winnipeg, those librarians already have a great relationship with many of the students that are struggling with child welfare, even in their education, maybe even in the justice system as well. And many of those children could benefit, many of those students could benefit from learning their language. And so this past summer, we were able to create the Inanimotan language nest at the St. John's Library, where we were able to meet once a week to talk about the language, learn how to introduce ourselves, learn different types of, we had a CD player, we called it Grandmother Kukum on the CD player, who was teaching all of us beginning language speakers how to speak, and then we would share that with one another. Right, and so that's really how we approached it. But we're trying to just take advantage of the tools and resources that our knowledge keepers left for us and try to use that knowledge to live a good life.
Well, that's certainly a great initiative there, so props to you on that, and the whole team, I imagine, that's working on that as well. But I mean, you're out in the community constantly, you're boots on the ground type of work a lot as well. What are you seeing in the community? What are they saying about some of the needs or lack thereof of some of the things that maybe they do need?
One thing I see constantly that Indigenous young people are asking for, and this maybe is a Manitoba phenomenon because of the high rates of child welfare that Indigenous young people are experiencing here. But I often see Indigenous youth talking about the importance of connecting with their family and building a strong network of kin. And we've even heard it already on this show about how important kinship is. And I think that that's the number one thing I'm seeing from Indigenous young people, saying that they want strong families, they want to be able to take care of their relatives, but they also want to be taken care of as relatives too, because too often, as we mentioned, systems don't ask young people what they want. And so my hope in the work that I do is that I can empower Indigenous youth to speak up in those places and be a helper in those moments where maybe they're uncertain about what to say and they maybe just need a bit more encouragement. Or sometimes what they need is a little bit of system knowledge. This is how the system operates, and all you have to do is be yourself, share your suggestion, and then there are a lot of helpers out there that want to empower Indigenous youth that will figure out the details later, but what we need from the Indigenous young people is their energy, their spirit, and their heart.
Well, how can Indigenous youth get out there more and speak up more if, like you said, they maybe don't know how the system works, or how can they start to use their voice and become advocates themselves?
I think one thing that is important for all young people is to be able to identify what your skill sets are. A lot of young people will talk negatively of themselves and they'll think, I'm not good at things. And so a big part of the work I do is trying to motivate and encourage young people to identify and understand what gifts they carry. And when you are able to identify and be honest about the gifts that you carry, not only are you going to be able to practice those gifts on a regular basis that will improve your mental health and your confidence, but it also will skill you up to the point where you're now able to share that gift in a constructive way. At one point, I was the kid who talked too much. Now it's my job to be a public speaker. And so I want to encourage those kids out there that maybe they're a little too much. Maybe they talk too much like I did. Maybe they got too much energy, just too much. And for those kids that are too much, you're not too much. You just have a big heart, and we need to find the places to put your energy and your gifts And I think that often activism is a great place for those young people if only they have the adults and the supporters to guide them in a good direction and make sure that as they are sharing their suggestions and their energy and their ideas and their enthusiasm and their impatience, because let's be honest, we all know young people, that they are supported and that they have the knowledge and the mentorship that they need to make constructive decisions that allow them to live that good life we were talking about.
Right. Really well said again, Michael. And just so with that, I mean, have you seen more Indigenous youth and Indigenous young people speaking out? Like, have you seen more and more, you know, activists, I guess, or young activists coming out and speaking out over the years? I mean, I know there wasn't a ton, you know, say a few years ago, but I think I've seen more. Like, have you seen more, especially around the Winnipeg area?
Well, I think what we're really seeing now is Indigenous young people are applying their leadership skills in many different sectors. And so, yes, we are seeing a lot of Indigenous youth that are leaders in activism, but we're also seeing Indigenous young people that are leaders in culture, in dancing, in singing, but also in non-Indigenous systems as well. So we're seeing Indigenous youth that are pushing at the forefront to improve healthcare for young people. We're seeing Indigenous youth that are pushing so that parents are supported when they're working to bring the children home in child welfare, and that young people that are aging out of CFS and often struggle with homelessness or housing insecurity have the resources and supports that they need. So I'm really encouraged by the depth of Indigenous youth leadership that I'm seeing across Canada right now, because it's not just activism, it's in media, and many other places as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up, because it isn't just speaking. It can be, like you said, in some of those non-Indigenous areas as well. And I know you have a children's book. I wanted to touch on this children's book you have coming out. Are you able to share with us a bit of this book that you have? It's supposed to be released in the new year, right? Without giving away too much, are you able to share with us what this project of yours is?
Yes, so the book that's coming out is called We Need Everyone, and it's for kids 2 to 6 years old. It's illustrated by Tiff Bartel and published by Highwater Press. It's coming out January 30th, just in time for I Love to Read Month. Pre-orders are available now. But what this book does is it accomplishes 2 things. First, it provides an instruction manual to kids to be able to identify what their gift is. The second thing it does is it celebrates the multitude of gifts and helpers that we have in our communities. Whether you're an athlete, an artist, or even a gamer, you're in the book to make sure that your gift is being celebrated. And so that's exactly what We Need Everyone is hoping to accomplish. And not only do I want to share this as my first kids book that helps to empower young people to find their gifts, I want to make sure that this book can get into the hands of kids and families that are struggling with their mental health or access to resources in isolated, rural, and remote communities as well, so that those families and those communities that are struggling and feel alone in mental health crises or dealing with suicide are able to have additional resources that are age appropriate for kids, so that we can really send that strong message to the children in First Nations, Métis, Inuit communities across Canada, but everywhere across Canada, that we really do need everyone.
Well, I know I, for one, am looking forward to this book, and I'm sure a lot of other people are. But Michael, just before we let you go, given everything we've talked about and some of the things that you've seen, where do you sort of see young Indigenous people and young people as a whole, I suppose, going with, you know, being leaders in all of these different fields and being activists and speaking up? Where do you see all this going, or where do you maybe hope to see it go in the future here?
Well, I talk a lot about the importance of revolution. And when I say revolution, what I'm talking about is eliminating whole systems and replacing them with entirely new systems that are based on love, equity, and justice. And so what I see from young people today is an impatience and an unwillingness to accept the status quo. And that makes me have a lot of hope that we are going to eliminate some of these harmful systems that separate families and hurt children. And we are going to see beautiful Indigenous leadership that is compassionate and generous and human and laughs and shares and is connected to their heart, but also makes constructive choices with their mind that are collaborative in nature and welcome all of the different perspectives that are sitting at the table to contribute to that solution. So I really see whole systems being eliminated in the coming years, and the buildup of brand new ones from Indigenous young people that are listening to the knowledge and wisdom from our ancestors.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be something, wouldn't it? Michael, really well said once again, as most things are with you. So we'll have to leave it there, but thank you again so much, Miigwech, to you for coming on and sharing a bit of insight, bit of knowledge. We certainly appreciate your time, as I'm sure our audience does. So thank you so much.
Appreciate.
All right, it is time now that we step aside for our final break. Still a couple more interviews still to come. Stick around. Welcome back to APTN in Focus. Let's just jump right ahead to our next guest now. Sadie Phoenix Lavoie is a 23-year-old Anishinaabe Two-Spirit from Sagkeeng First Nation in Manitoba. Sadie has worked on numerous student-led initiatives, including the Indigenous course requirement and the fossil fuel divestment campaign. Sadie, thank you so much for joining us here today on APTN in Focus. Now, the show, it's all about Indigenous youth and them becoming the faces of activism and voices of activism, really. So my first question for you, I thought I'd keep it simple, and why is it important that Indigenous youth and more Indigenous youth use their voice and speak out?
I think that's a great question, because honestly, like, the future is what we make it, and in a lot of sense, our voices like lead the direction as to where we want to go as like an Indigenous community. And you know, we've had elders telling us to speak up, and so it's really important for us to find our gifts and figure that out, and to spread that outwards and to better community, and to find our purpose.
Now, you've done a oh, sorry, continue.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you've done a lot of really great work over the years, and like, when did you realize you wanted to use your voice to speak out, or is speaking out sort of something you've always done?
Yeah, I think it was in my first or second year of university at the University of Winnipeg. I took Indigenous Studies, and during that time was when the start of Idle No More had happened. And it was during those round dances at the mall that, like, I was surrounded by our people, and we were drumming and singing and holding hands, that I was just like so moved, and said that, you know, this is something where this is where I belong. This is something I want to do, and this is something I want to reclaim and learn about. And while I was in university, I was learning about colonialism and genocide in residential schools, and I was obviously very angry, and I didn't know how to channel that anger, and you know, activism and organizing and educating was my way of, you know, channeling that into something positive, something that was bringing change and bringing inspiration to other people, and made me feel good about the work that I was doing. And sure, and like, people were saying, you know, like, the things that I was saying, and was sharing truth. And so once I started learning that, like, of my clan, being a Turtle Clan member, and learning about my spirit name, and going on that journey of, like, reclaiming my identity as an Indigenous Anishinaabe Two-Spirit, you know, I really kind of, like, stepped into these roles, and I honestly didn't know where it would take me, and it's been a journey, and it's been a great journey, and I'm very thankful for the work that I've done and the people I've surrounded with, my community. And you know, it's really hard to say, like, where I'd be if I wasn't active. And so, if anything, it's like community organizing and activism has really saved me, and made me feel like, you know, I belong here, and I have a higher purpose. And so really, it's just kind of like sharing that message of, like, hope and resilience, and reclaiming what was taken from us, and trying to change things into a positive way. Yeah, even though that we were dealing with so much trauma and having to heal and having to go through this journey, you know, we could do it together, and we can help figure things out, and challenge the oppressors, and try to, like, figure out, like, what do we need to do? What is their vision? What is our goals in life? And how can we help each other achieve that? And sometimes it's having to be a resistor and sorry for the language, but like sometimes it's having to kind of get people to see what they're failing to see or refuse to see, and helping people in that process of unlearning and learning. And yeah, just centering community in that.
So then, as you go through this journey, who do you lean on for support and guidance as you go about this?
I lean a lot on my friends. I have a lot of great friends that also do a lot of the same work. You know, we've kind of built a network, a chosen fam of like, you know, other radical youth, other people's just like ceremony folks, elders, you know, just people that care and understand the frustrations you're dealing with, you know, and people you can celebrate these victories with. And sometimes it's kind of it's draining, and it can be like a lot of burnout, having to deal with, you know, the constant struggle of oppression and having to fight and not fully get what we deserve, and you know, having to have somebody there that is understanding of what we're all going through, and making sure that, you know, we're taking care of ourselves and doing self-care, and you know, it's mainly a lot of like community care. And you know, that I've had a lot of bumps along the way, and you know, it's community that's really like helped me lift me back up and kept me going. So it's just kind of a reciprocal relationship with community of giving and you know, getting help and received help from other people, and people, even strangers, have helped me out along the way. And so it's like, it's definitely you know, lots of struggles, but also like there's lots of great moments of just joy and happiness of being together and working hard together. But yeah, it's definitely lots of friends and lots of community folk.
Well, and Sadie, you were also one of the co-founders of the Winnipeg-based Red Rising magazine, which gives Indigenous youth a platform to share their perspectives and experiences to a broader audience without censorship, which I think is a big key there. How did that whole idea sort of come about?
Well, it was this, you know, I think it was like we were a bunch of group of us that were like hanging out, and we had all these like little plotting sessions, we call them, and we would just basically we would just eat and talk and share ideas of things that we want to do, or things that we think that are really important to us as young people. And we just felt like, you know, we needed to have control over the narratives of what was being shared about Indigenous peoples, and we had stories that we wanted to talk about that were positive, or, you know, actually coming from us, from a lived experience. And sometimes it's like having to go through these filters of media, it doesn't actually get the whole story. And so we wanted to figure out a way to uplift young people, to share with their stories directly from them, without having to be worried about, you know, having their quotes edited or cropped, or you know, yeah, like they basically have control of their whole story and how they want to share it. So we just do call outs and shoulder tapping on people that were making really, really important perspectives, I guess, on social media, and it just kind of grew in that way. Yeah, and I think it was really great that I feel like in a sense, like it started a lot of community dialogue that we needed at the time. And we just kept going and going and going to see like how far could we go. Like we honestly didn't know how many issues we would do. And a lot of the work that we were already doing stuff in the community already. And at that point it was just kind of like, yeah, the community really supported it and funded it. And a lot of the young people like felt like they were reflected by it, and a lot of the schools really were like needing this type of information, because like, you know, reconciliation was a big topic during these times. And so yeah, it's like it gives a kind of a glimpse into our realities outside of just mainstream media or scholarly work. So yeah, it was really great.
And you touched on it a little bit, but what was the feedback like on it from the youth that were using it, but also the communities and the people that were consuming that and reading that? What was the feedback on the magazine?
Yeah, I mean, some of the stories, some of the people that had written articles or submitted some of their work. You know, it was like the first time that they ever shared some of those stories to anybody, like not even to their families. And so for them, it was like a process of healing and relief to say, like, you know, I was able to kind of give myself power and show like that there's people out there that have gone through the same experiences that I'm going through, to kind of get that recognition of shared experience. And then at the same time, it was like young people feeling like, you know, they can be published, that they can put their work next to somebody who's a featured writer and author who's been published many times. So sorry, it was like, yeah, just like being able to show them that, you know, it's possible, you can do this, and your voice matters.
Mm-hmm. And Sadie, what are some of the other ways that Indigenous youth can use their voice to speak up? Like, what advice would you have for them if, you know, they feel, you know, empowered about a situation and you know, they maybe want to use their voice and you know, to speak up?
I feel like getting involved with different types of groups of people that are doing kind of community work on the front lines, educating yourself and trying to find ways that, or trying to find things that are like what is missing and how to trailblaze, or like find the things that like what do we need to work on and to be more inclusive, or what are things that I care about that like I need support on, and trying to build coalition groups. Really it's just kind of figuring out how to like, you know, connect everybody together on a particular issue and build momentum, and to not get lost in some of the like, you know, backlashes that might happen, because it's just gonna bound to happen. So there's going to be ups and downs, and so I always think like, you know, as long as like everybody is like agreeant of the principle of what you're trying to do, and yeah, people can disagree on like strategy or tactics, like don't get caught up on that, and just say, you know, if you're trying to do good work and you're trying to, you know, revitalize or stay connected to your culture, to your people, to young people, and learn, you know, you can't really go wrong in that sense. So every effort is really beneficial to the community as a whole. So, you know, it may seem like a small action, but overall in the big picture, it's very meaningful. And so I don't want people to feel discouraged by some of the work, you know, like, or to find different areas that like need attention, and need people to be focusing on. And so a lot of stuff was like community service work or volunteering, and just getting involved and getting to know our community members, getting to know our relatives, and finding the people that, you know, have the funding, or like people that have like the resources, and you know, just kind of being strategic in that sense. But overall, like, yeah, just staying I guess focused on the principle itself, is, you know, you're trying to uplift, you're trying to empower and spread gifts, and show that people are valuable, no matter what it is, you know, and that we're all leaders in our own way, and to just keep working hard as much as possible, and to take care of ourselves and of each other, and hopefully, you know, eventually we'll get to where we need to go, in terms of like the vision of where Indigenous young people will see us as Indigenous communities. So, I mean, I just hope that, like, you know, young people understand that they have value, and that they have something to offer, and they have gifts that should be shared, and for other people to listen and to make space for them, and to accept Indigenous leadership, especially young people. You know, because they have so much to offer, and there's always so much more that we can do. It's just as long as like people aren't like not getting in the way of things.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really great advice, Sadie, and really, you know, well thought out, and everything that you've said today, I'm sure a lot of our audience is going to take to heart. So we'll have to leave it there, but I want to say thank you, Miigwech, to you for, again, sharing a bit of your story, and we really do appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Miigwech.
All right, and joining us from our bureau in Vancouver now is Palaxelia, so I apologize on the pronunciation on that, Lorelei Williams. She is a longtime advocate for murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Lorelei, thank you so much for being able to join us here today. Now, first off, I just wanted to ask you about, you just completed a tour with your dance troupe of Butterflies in Spirit across Latin America, right? Can you tell us about that? That sounds super interesting.
Yes, thank you for having me. I went on a tour with my dance group, Butterflies in Spirit, in Colombia and Mexico. We did about 5 performances, 3 in Colombia and 2 in Mexico. But we also met with some Indigenous groups over there and talked about this issue. It was such an amazing tour. We got to meet the Otomi people and the fight that they're fighting down there, and yeah, it was just an amazing experience. And with our group, we have some Indigenous dancers from Canada, but we also have some dancers in our group from Mexico as well. It was an amazing performance.
So Lorelei, what did you take away from that, with the dance, but also having discussions about MMIWG? What did you take away from the trip there?
Well, we met with a few different people from government, the community, advocacy groups, and we took a lot away from those as well. We shared the issue of MMIWG2S here in Canada, and they were shocked to hear about these issues. We also shared the issues of the residential school system and what they did, the racism in Canada, and they shared their issues with us as well. So we made connections with the government, those advocacy groups, and we built amazing relationships with them, and we just want to help each other and support each other on this issue. You know, down there they actually call it the disappeared. So when they search for their disappeared, there's a lot of violence down there, and being in Colombia and Mexico, there's a lot of people doing work down there. The families are searching for their loved ones, where they're actually finding human remains and bodies. So the work that they are doing down there is amazing. The UN has actually acknowledged that they're quite far ahead than anybody else in the world on searching for the disappeared. So, yeah.
And how important, Lorelei, is it that we are building those connections between different countries and different groups of people, but we all sort of have the same issue and are facing the same issue? How important is it that we make those connections, like you said?
I think it's very important to connect with these 2 countries specifically because they're so far ahead on searching for the disappeared. I've been going back and forth to Mexico quite a bit to search for the disappeared, and I've gained so much experience down there that I would never gain up here. Like when I joined the National Brigade and the International Brigade, we searched for the disappeared and we found human remains. The first time I went down, we found human remains. The second time I went down, we found human remains and 1 body. The third time that I went down, we found, I think it was 4 to 6 bodies. And I had never experienced anything like that before. And, 2 bodies were being pulled out of 1 grave, I guess you could say, 1 area of dirt. And, on these journeys, I've been able to use them searching for missing and murdered Indigenous women up here in Canada. There's one example where we were on a truck in Mexico. We were climbing the mountains. We climbed 1 mountain, and then we were climbing a second mountain. And then all of a sudden, there was coyotes running up the side of the mountain, and they started to jump out and chase after the coyotes. And I was like, what are they doing? And the reason why they did that was because they can find remains in the coyote dens. So when coyotes find bodies, they'll drag them to the dens. So I was able to use that experience up here in Canada. When Chelsea Portman was found, the police were saying that some animals might have taken pieces of her. So I was able to share with them, well, if you're saying that, there's parks nearby with coyotes, and I know that this is what they do. So with those experiences down there, I have lots of experience down there that has helped me in the searches here. Even with the landfill, I have a meeting tonight actually with some people from the brigade to share their experience with me of searching a landfill, because I'm actually going to Winnipeg and I'm going to join them at the landfill. So I want to be able to share that experience or that information with them at the landfill.
Mm-hmm. Well, Lorelei, you know, you've been a longtime advocate for missing and murdered women and girls. How did you first start, or when maybe did you first start as an activist for MMIWG?
It started back in 2012. It just fell on my lap. Well, I guess it really started before I was born. I feel like I was born into this with my missing aunt, not realizing it. You know, my aunt was missing and I grew up with my family around me missing my aunt. And then, you know, my cousin went missing in 1996, and then I was exposed to it again there. But I became an advocate during the Wally Opal inquiry. I was sitting in the inquiry and hearing all the stories and hearing all the lawyers and judges and the police, and I just felt like they weren't really getting the issue. I felt like they didn't care about this issue. And I wanted to get their attention, even though our lawyers were doing a lot of work in there. I just felt like I needed to get their attention, and then I started a dance group called Butterflies in Spirit. And we blocked the streets off. The community helped us block the streets off, and we did our performance. And it wasn't just a regular dance. We actually sent a message. One of our signature moves is us laying on the ground and being covered by a sheet, which sends a message. So you have it looked like a bunch of dead bodies in the middle of a busy intersection downtown Vancouver in front of the Wally Opal inquiry. And we sent a message that way. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, but we started to get asked to perform at all of these other places, conferences across Canada, events, and that was back on April 30th, 2012.
Wow. And
you know, we just finished a Latin American tour, so we started getting invited to other countries. We've done performances in the US, Colombia, Mexico. We've been back and forth to Mexico quite a bit. But not only that, we're not just a dance group anymore. We actually support families on searches, candlelight vigils, rallies, and we actually support families when they meet with the police and media. And so we've kind of evolved and, you know, doing searches in Mexico now as well. So.
And Lorelei,
Yeah.
if you could sum up in just a few sentences, any words of advice about what women and girls can do to maybe safeguard themselves from danger?
I feel like I'm always taking self-defense courses. I'm always staying up to date on tips of how to stay safe, but also staying connected to my community. You know, I like, one thing I do is I share my Uber rides with somebody whenever I take an Uber. And this is something that they do in Colombia as well. Mm-hmm. You know, this is something that needs to be done. Me and my butterflies, we always share where we're going, what we're doing, or with my partner as well. I always share my Uber rides with my partner. And I just discovered on Uber that you can actually press a button and the phone will record. If you feel like you're in danger, the phone will call the Uber people and it will actually start recording. There's an option. I didn't even know it was there. It's the blue shield button on the Uber app.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, so I just keep up to date. I work with the police. I hold them accountable, so I kind of know what's going on out there. But I always have just people around me, and I make sure that everybody knows where I am. And I always have to keep myself safe. You know,
Yeah, that's a really good thing and a really good feature that you just brought up with the Uber thing there. Lorelei, I wish we had more time, but unfortunately, that's how it goes with live TV sometimes. But I do want to say thank you, Miigwech, to you for coming on and being able to speak with us for a little bit today and share a bit of what you do and the work that you do with all of this. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right, that is all we have for you this afternoon on APTN InFocus. Today's episode will be available as a podcast. You can listen and subscribe on aptnnews.ca/podcasts, or you can find us on your favorite player. And if you missed any of our past episodes and you want to catch up, you can find them and more on aptnnews.ca/infocus. Thank you to all of our guests for joining us today, and thank you as well for tuning in. Have a great afternoon.